Right now, Vice is currently collapsing. Once estimated to be worth almost $6 billion, Vice is now being slammed by its major investors like Disney, who claim that their investments in Vice are now completely worthless.
I'm sorry, this is just too funny and ironic. Disney cannot stop taking L after L. It's almost like it's their job just to lose at everything they do. All their investments, all their endeavors, the streaming service, complete garbage. Kids shows, parents absolutely hate it for the most part. Their newest endeavor, what is their newest endeavor? The Little Mermaid who got vulcanized into being black? Oh, it's just too hilarious. Honestly, anything that Disney touches turns into shit nowadays, and everything that Disney has been involved with previously has already turned to shit. Weiss should honestly sue Disney at this point for damages to it. Oh, it's just too good.
Which isn't much of a surprise considering the huge drop in quality of Vice's content, and as a result of this, Vice is failing to hit any of its expected revenue goals.
I will argue with this. So, first of all, I would like to point out the revenue goals. Revenue goals are something that makes and breaks a publicly traded company. If a company is reaching revenue goals and breaking revenue goals, essentially just performing as expected, then the investors have absolute confidence because that means one thing, mainly. It means a lot of other things, but this is the main thing. It means that this, whatever endeavor that is, has still not reached its peak. It still hasn't reached its ceiling of people that it can suck in and do things with. And as long as that point has not been reached, the company can still grow in value. But the moment they do not reach their established revenue goals without a very good excuse, because sometimes a good excuse can actually save the stock plummet, but it's still going to happen. But if there's a good reason why a stock plummet actually happened, what was completely outside of the company's prerogative, then it can be saved. But usually, if a publicly traded company does not reach their revenue goals, it's downhill. We have seen it, by the way, with all those interactive media companies like Facebook, Instagram, and so on. All of these companies, the moment they did not hit their first revenue goal, their stock just dipped into the red, and it was horrible.
In fact, the main content on Vice is now flopping. The key journalists and founders behind Vice's golden years have now abandoned ship, and it seems like the passion behind Vice is just completely dead. Which begs the question, what went so wrong for Vice? Well, with
Times changed. That's what went wrong with Vice, honestly. Nothing really else. I completely just obliviously looked over it. But Vice actually never had that great of content to begin with. Half of it was always trash, and most of it was always trash. Vice just did good documentaries. That's pretty much it.
weirdly, it was almost destined from the start. You see, Vice always relied on its edgy content to bring in viewers. It was the core of Vice's entire business model. It's fair to say that back in the 90s, the media was nothing close to what it is today. And back then, Vice was actually way ahead of the...
There was a lot less clickbait, and do you want to guess who did clickbait? These guys, right here, these guys. They did clickbait before clickbait was clickbait.
Curve. Being founded back in 1994, Vice would pride itself on reporting stories that were actually on the cutting edge of what was deemed socially acceptable in society.
That's also true.
Topics ranging from anti-establishment pieces, political hit jobs, drug romanticization, and even articles like The Vice Guide to Shagging Muslims. With headlines like these, it was no wonder why Vice started catching the eyes of young adults and investors alike. And
that was also the time when it was the boom of reality television that went against the establishment, that supported drugs and all these radical lifestyles, quote unquote. That was the time. It was the time of Jackass. It was the time of MTV. So yeah, obviously a lot of companies that did things that we would nowadays call social activities, they got a big hit. They got a big boost. They became big exactly by doing that at that time. Because that was the popular thing.
Because of this, throughout the 2000s, it was all smooth sailing for Vice. And you can see this by looking at the search volume for Vice. By looking at this graph, it's clear that Vice was unstoppable. It was one of the most searched things on the entire internet back in the early 2000s, signing multi-million contracts with MTV and expanding ever more across the internet. With
MTV. You know the M in MTV stands for Music TV? Yeah, I know. What a thing to remember. There was a time when it legitimately had a lot of music, and then occasionally Jackass and things like that.
all of this growth being fueled by Vice's edgy material, something that was hard-pressed to come by back in the day. Some of their earlier shows would reach widespread acclaim, like their amazing series The Vice Guide to Travel, which featured documentaries around the axis of evil, North Korea, Iran, and the Pakistani gun markets. But this was only a small slither of the real content on Vice, because the bulk of Vice's content was still on its website. To stand out from all the other...
That content was shit. Those documentaries were the actual good thing. Vice still, ironically, actually sometimes produces extremely good in-depth documentaries about subjects. It's rare nowadays, but they kind of still have it. But the problem nowadays with Vice is not the only one who's producing content like that, and they produce it slower than everyone else. And by everyone else, I mean probably, guys with video cameras in their houses just reciting Wikipedia articles about the top 10 murderers of X year. Yeah, you can't outpace that as a solo company, so that's a big deal.
Media companies. Vice would always write articles on edgy topics with clickbait titles. By doing this, Vice was able to garner tons of attention. If you saw one of their articles on why all masculinity is toxic, or if you felt angry after reading that article of the
Wait, this sounds like a modern day thing.
Trend of gender diversity on plane hijack it.
Yeah, wait, this is modern Vice. Or was this also Vice previously? No one just paid attention.
Or if you felt disgusted by sex with bugs, drinking vaginal juice, and men with fart fetishes, you would then spread this around. People would begin talking about this content. And this was one of the key reasons why Vice was able to garner so much attention. The way it took...
Oh, this thing. So yeah, essentially, there's studies, research that, concludes that, well, it's pretty much conclusive without research, like, let's be honest, everyone can probably understand this, that negative content spreads so much easier and garnishes so much more attention than positive content. People want to share the negative stuff. People want to talk about the negative stuff. If you hear about a child getting blown up by someone, you're probably going to talk about how awful that was and share whatever information you have about that, than about some kind of cute squirrel doing cute squirrel things caught on video. It's just the way we are as humans.
Took over mainstream culture was very similar to Andrew Tate's rise to fame, and because this was so successful, the company began focusing almost entirely on content they deemed to be edgy, whether the material was actually good or not. Because fundamentally, this is what got clicks, and for a while, it really paid off, as seen with the insane volume of search traffic Vice Media was gaining, and with the search...
Okay, when you show me a graph like this, I do not believe you, because a lot of people don't know even how to read Google Trending. So this is the highest point in the search history that this person has selected, which starts at 2004, it seems like, which is probably the first time it got recorded on Google. This is the highest point that it was ever searched. So it means if there's 1,000 people who have in their life searched for Vice, this is the point they did it in a singular day. That this is what this graph means. But without anything else, without us seeing a graph going down, you can't even actually estimate anything.
Traffic came huge multi-million-dollar investments. However, this content strategy was a double-edged sword, because you see, back in Vice's golden years, their clickbait garbage was balanced out by their groundbreaking documentaries.
Well, no, actually, that's not even really that true. I guess we can say that's semi-true. People just, knew it's a hit or miss. A documentary is going to be really good most of the time. An article is, okay, if you actually like Vice articles, I don't know what to say. But people just liked Vice for documentaries mainly. That was always really, really good. And at the start of Vice, they didn't really have that much competition. Their competition was mainstream media most of the time. Technically, I should say probably mainstream media, because no other site really wanted to do the edginess. There was no other edgy site like Vice that was like the news.
Which gave Vice a good reputation in some corners of the internet, as seen with their popular shows like The Vice Guide to Travel and Hamilton's Pharmacopoeia. Vice would still use clickbait titles for these documentaries, but then this would be backed up by high-quality journalist deep dives by masters of the field, like for example the scientist Hamilton Morris, who created one of Vice's most popular columns, Hamilton's Pharmacopoeia, back in the early 2000s, where Hamilton would write articles about all kinds of drugs. But the problem was that this content was just so much harder to make, not to mention a lot more risky, because for every Hamilton Morris, there were countless other Vice journalists who weren't bringing in the cash or attention that Vice needed to sustain its content expansion. To fund these documentaries cost an enormous amount of money, but if Vice could still generate enough clicks and attention through cheap clickbait articles by undergrads talking about fart fetishes, then why not capitalize on this? Because at the same time of Vice's golden years, BuzzFeed's booming clickbait factory was skyrocketing. It seemed like this formula was the best road to go down, and so Vice...
Oh, yeah, also there was BuzzFeed, but BuzzFeed was kind of meh. Vice was still bigger, I guess. Admittedly, there was also a time where BuzzFeed was big. I just never used it.
To continue down this path. Instead of producing the eye-catching and actually edgy videos that they were known for, Vice would then instead pump out clickbait, lukewarm articles and videos. Vice was beginning to take the easy way out and started laying out the groundwork for coasting along merely on their reputation of being edgy, relying on their built-up reputation from their good documentaries to sustain their content factory farm. But while this issue was starting
there we go, that seems a little bit more on point.
To become increasingly apparent to those paying attention, this didn't mean that Vice was actually losing any traction. In fact, many of their most popular videos would be released around this time frame in the early 2010s. Documentaries like The World's Scariest Drug, The UK Scariest Debt Collector, and
World's Scariest Drug. Wasn't this the drug that made people like zombies and allowed you to control them? Colombia. Yeah, this is probably it. This was a really good video. This was amazing. The debt collector thing, I don't remember this one, but this one was absolutely fire. If you haven't watched it, watch it. It's really great. Scopolamine. I think that's it. Yeah, I think this is that one. It's really good.
An underground LSD palace, and the Suicide Forest in Japan. All of these...
good old Suicide Forest. We have to take Logan Paul for reinvigorating about us about the good old Suicide Forest times.
Forest in Japan. All of these videos contain really interesting topics that appeal to a wide audience, with all of these videos reaching tens of millions of views. This content was still living up to the quality standards that Vice was somewhat known for, but their most groundbreaking...
Also, 10 years ago, 10 million views and things like that, that was pretty big. That was a different time. There were a lot less people on YouTube back 10 years back, honestly.
Documentary being This Is What Winning Looks Like. Released in 2013, Vice's film tackled a subject of the Afghan war that no other mainstream media outlets would dare to talk about. The documentary focused on the issues of rampant sexual abuse towards adolescent boys that was prevalent among the Afghani police force. But while everything...
what's new, honestly?
Seemed perfect on the outside, Vice was now beginning to rot in the inside. 2013 would be the first year where Vice's underlying problems reached a breaking point, and this problem began with their shareholders. You see, with all of Vice's growth, new investors, managers, and employees played a significant role in changing Vice's content focus. Because of this, one of Vice's co-founders, Gavin McInnes, saw this growing issue and left the company years earlier in 2008, well before things started getting really bad. Gavin stated during his departure that the expanding influence advertisers were getting over their content was not something he wanted to deal with. He knew this
So yeah, this is how it pretty much happens in companies like Vice and similar things, and even on YouTube to a certain extent. Admittedly, on YouTube with sponsors and things, it's a little bit different. But when you're a company and someone starts investing in you, obviously they're giving you money so you can give them back money. But that means they have power over you, because the moment someone actually is holding money over you because you took someone's money, they have a say in what you do. And obviously Vice doing the edgelord things, well, some advertisements obviously thought that maybe X is going a little bit too far. And then another advertiser thought maybe Y is going a little bit too far. So they had to downscale things, because otherwise they would lose the investors' money. You know, things like that. And that's a really big problem. Because when that starts, you can't really stop it because you can't just still say no to the guy who's paying your paycheck, you know?
Big factory path was going to ruin all the credibility and reputation Vice had worked so hard to build. And it turned out that Vice's main editorial board and the advertising executives had been butting head for a long time, and Gavin had finally gotten sick of it. It was an omen of
Yeah, that makes sense. Because the editorial board, the people who actually decide what kind of content is going to be made and so on, well, that's not exactly the editorial board, I guess. But essentially, they're saying that the people who decided to what kind of content is going to be made obviously clashed heads with the people who wanted to market the company because one part of wants to, well, this is my guess, but one part wants to make edgy content, the other one needs to put the brakes on certain things because that would be a technical PR disaster considering you need to be in certain walls so everything just goes smoothly and no one starts creating problems for you because your content is just too evil, too edgy, or too something.
to come. Because what was even worse than the co-founder's departure was that big media moguls like Rupert Murdoch would soon be injecting millions into Vice, with Rupert Murdoch specifically injecting 70 million into the company. Now, for
That's
those
a
who
lot
don't
of
know,
money.
Rupert Murdoch is a billionaire who has centralized ownership of hundreds of publishing outlets, such as the Wall Street Journal, The Sun, The Times, Fox News, and many others. And Murdoch also invested heavily into Vice around 2013, and only a year later, Vice would then receive even more investments from another power-hungry media giant by the name of Disney, who purchased.
Oh, by the way, also, this is a thing that happens with companies, and this is kind of actually really bad, even though it seems good, but it can be completely destructive for a company. So you have this, millionaire, billionaire Rupert Boopert, and he starts investing like 100 mil into this random company that's obviously doing pretty good and whatnot. But he can't hide the fact that he's investing in the company, and obviously other companies follow suit. Well, not follow suit, but they follow what other people do. So if some millionaire media mogul suddenly invests into a company, people are thinking, oh my god, he's gonna make that company better. We better invest also. So Disney sees that. Disney's like, I gotcha, fam. Puts 400 mil in, and then someone else sees it. They pump in more money. They pump in more money, and then you have a problem. All this money has been pumped into you, but you have no fucking clue what to do. You have more money than you need to do things, but the problem is you did not scale your operations to this level. You're clueless. You don't know what's your next move gonna be because now you can't do the one move that you were planning for all this year. No, now you have to do 10 of the same moves at the same time because you need to expand dramatically because of these investments. Because if you do nothing, that means just you're sitting on your investors' money, which is extremely bad.
10% ownership of Vice during 2014, and later gained an even further share of around 20% after another investment.
He
in
regrets it now,
this
boys.
was great for the short term, allowing the Vice co-founder Shane Smith to become a billionaire. But in the long
that's
term,
true.
this was disastrous. This all seemed too good to be true, and that's because it was. Little did anyone know what was coming for Vice over the following years.
The Zoomer
But
generation.
before we continue, I want to tell you about today's sponsor, Morning Brew.
Oh.
Morning Brew is a free daily newsletter delivered to you Monday.
Morning Brew is a free daily newsletter that doesn't give you any valuable information because if anyone has actually any valuable information, then they fucking make you pay for it. So obviously Morning Brew is a fucking hoax. Do not use it. My opinion.
Have been lying about Vice's real value all throughout the company's entire history.
Right?
Founder of Vice, Shane Smith, had been lying about Vice's real value all throughout the company's entire history. Shane had been consistently overblowing the potential of his media outlet and using his early skills as a salesman
Classic
successfully
also.
fooled many of its investors. That's why you'll be hard-pressed to find any kind of data or statistics regarding Vice's value or popularity, because even the people who owned and invested in the company didn't actually know its true worth. Since the company's founding, Vice has done everything it can to hide Vice's real value.
Okay, so this seems like a stupid situation, but people are not gonna take the risk of not hitting it big with a company like Vice when everything seems good. Even if they don't provide numbers, some companies will risk it. And that's seemingly obviously what happened with at least Disney, as we know from the start. But yeah, usually this doesn't slide because people are a little bit smarter. They probably missed out on a lot of investment because they couldn't provide the numbers. Because every company, before doing an actual big investment, wants to see some numbers at the bare minimum.
But once investors eventually found out, they soon realized what was going on and called for drastic measures. They needed money now because Vice was failing to hit any profits. Each year they were below their targets. And with this rapid pile-on of major corporate investors, Vice had to do something fast. So the first and easiest way to make money was to get more advertisements. However, advertisers weren't particularly fond of being associated with controversial and edgy political topics, which was Vice.
This is kind of true, but kind of false at the same time. Coca-Cola is gonna put their fucking product on, a terrorist blowing up a children's hospital, as long as no one gives a shit about that, even if they know it's bad. This is the reality. Advertisers don't really care too much as long as they know that there's not gonna be any backlash. Vice had the misfortune of creating a situation where people understood that there could potentially be backlash.
This is core premise. And so in order to meet the demands of investors, Vice would need to change their content to appease the advertisers to appease the investors. So Vice's first move would be to sanitize their content. And it was this kind of short-term thinking that would be detrimental to Vice. Instead of journalism that was priding itself as being on the edge of what was socially acceptable, Vice was now getting sanitized by the investors.
Short-term is trash.
Although by posting these cleaner videos, Vice wasn't getting the same kind of positive reception that their older videos received. So much so that a lot of people started asking questions about it. Many began asking why the Vice they once knew was now getting bombarded with dislikes, seemingly out of nowhere. From 2015 onwards, there were forum posts after forum posts discussing the fall of Vice's content. They went from making genuinely good documentaries from dangerous locations to overhyping ordinary stories to try and get more viewers. I really liked the content.
What the fuck is even that?
It was good and hard hitting, but then it all went to shit. They're trying too hard to stay hip and cool and underground. The quality of Vice's videos seems to have dropped, and several of their headlines are nothing more than clickbait. Furthermore, Vice's clickbait content would continue to erode all the reputation it had once built. The clickbait factory was turning in on itself. BuzzFeed was facing the consequences, and now Vice was too. Relying on these crappy videos like single Japanese women buying the boy.
That's, by the way, true. Ironically enough, I don't know if it was true 5 years ago and whenever that video was made, but it's true now. It's actually like legit true in Japan.
Different experience, and Pussy Riot gets whipped in Sochi to get anywhere near the sorts of views they used to get 10 years before. And while Vice has always used at least some amount of clickbait, this empty content was now beginning to get on people's nerves. And by just simply taking...
Yeah, people are willing to tolerate some shit if there comes content that's actually worth it. But if there's more, but if their shit tolerance gets overwhelmed, then it's kind of bad.
Glance at the state of the channel's most popular uploads, this decline in Vice's content quality is extremely clear and apparent. Medically assisted sex, the world's first male sex doll, sex gurus, answering questions and other similar topics are pretty much the only kind of documentaries Vice is finding any kind of success in.
Zoomer's gonna zoom.
Companies advertise
Boomer's gonna boom.
allow them to make this kind of content. And the only reason is because sexy, inappropriate material is much easier to get away with compared to politically inappropriate material. Advertisers don't care about sex, they care about politics. So instead of the Vice that was once known for reporting on both of these controversial subjects...
That's not true. Advertisers care about whatever the hell people are currently upset about. If people are upset en masse about X, advertisers are not going to exactly advertise on X. Even though it doesn't actually make sense, and most people in reality don't care, it's literally just Twitter screeching nowadays. But advertisers will still kind of ignore that and remove funding from the things that could potentially negatively impact them.
Subjects, their possible video ideas have now been pretty much cut in half, causing much of Vice's core audience to now abandon the channel, and as a result there has been a steady decline in the channel's views and revenue. Additionally, the increase in shareholder sway is almost certainly why Vice short-sightedly started branching their attention towards different channels, a decision that would also compound to cripple the company even.
By the way, if you want to know how detrimental short-term thinking can be for a company, think about Amazon. the way Bezos got Amazon off the ground was essentially just convincing shareholders that, yeah, we're gonna work with negative profits for like 4 or 5 years or some shit like that. We're not gonna make a penny, but after that, we're gonna dominate. That's what Bezos sold them, and that's what the investors believed. And well, look how Amazon is now.
More because Vice's attention wasn't only focused on their clickbait factory, they were now focusing on so many other channels: Vice Munchies, Vice News, Vice Sports, Vice Life, and all the others eventually began popping up out of nowhere. And whilst this might have been good on the surface to generate more revenue, these videos detracted from Vice's core channel, while also causing their intended audience to spread themselves even thinner. It seemed like the shareholders were overwhelmingly out of touch when deciding where to take Vice as a media outlet. If someone wanted to watch videos on food or sports, there were hundreds of other channels to get a better and more focused perspective instead of watching it on Vice. This decision to bring about other channels made Vice just look like another typical media outlet, instead of the edgy organization that once reported on things that no one else would even touch. And so unsurprisingly, this decision to launch more channels and lower their focus on the main one caused Vice to start noticeably falling downhill throughout the mid-2010s. Although the company was still finding occasional successes with their new releases, these videos certainly weren't of any quality.
I fell in love with the Six doll. I think I have seen it, but not from Vice.
Their most popular uploads, all the recent videos gaining any kind of tractions, are the ones using massive sexual clickbait. And to make matters even worse, Vice's downfall wasn't good news for the company's shareholders either, as most of them would end up losing their money. Once they found out that Vice was always artificially inflated, investors would start to pull out of the company. All the CEO of Vice's rhetoric about pay Vice to join its youth revolution or get left behind, and his claims of having a monopoly on the young adult audience, was now slipping through Vice's fingers. In fact, Vice reported themselves to somehow be worth a whopping $5.7 billion at one point, and stated that they would later be worth $50 billion by the end of the decade.
Oh my god! This is the classic, oh yeah, we're worth X and no one evaluates us, and people just fucking buy that shit up. Oh, I never understood why, oh my god. It's just literally meme stocks. It's just literally the definition of meme stocks. There's no one who can actually tell you what's going on in the stock market because nothing the fuck is going on. If a company says it's worth 3 trillion trillions, then congratulations, you're worth 3 trillion trillions because reasons. Did FaZe Clan self-determine their worth also when they became a publicly traded company? I think so, if I remember correctly. And they were worth also like $1 billion or some shit. It was insane.
Unfortunately for Vice and its investors, the supposed influence and value they had was so unrealistic and absurd that Vice's house of cards is now tumbling into the ground. You see, Vice's overblown value claims have left the company out to dry multiple times. As an example, only 1 year after claiming to be worth billions, Vice missed their annual revenue target by $100 million, all to the displeasure.
A revenue goal of, oh damn, that's all. Yeah, that's a lot. That's around 12.5%. Well, 13.2 maybe. That's a lot of percent. That's a huge thing. 1% okay. 2% okay-ish. 3% okay, fuck off. But man, more than 10%, yeah, you're burning.
Of the company's investors. This wasn't the only time that Vice has inflated their market value either. In 2021, Vice was planning a special purpose acquisition company merger with 7GC, a deal valued at nearly $3 billion, but the arrangement ended up falling through. This was a disaster for Vice, as this attempted merger was the only way that Vice would make up for the lost revenue. This merger would have built a bridge to, quote, figure out something, a phrase highlighting just how lost Vice was and what to actually do with the company. This whole ordeal ended up causing the chairman of Vice to relinquish even more of his voting control and forced him to spread it even further amongst investors, with the investors dragging down Vice, now having more power and influence over the company's operations. And with shareholders like Rupert Murdoch on Disney controlling Vice, it's not hard to see why the company began aiming more towards safer content instead of the edgy material that made them popular in the first place. And in all honesty, what are these investors supposed to do with Vice in its current state anyways? There might be a clearer direction if the news outlet was based on a single channel, but there are just so many sub-stories to worry about as well.
Okay, the many channel split actually kind of technically does not matter, because YouTube can reward you hugely for diversifying in different niches. If your channel is everything, sometimes YouTube doesn't exactly know who the hell they're supposed to give the video unless it's already a viewer of the channel in general. There can be problems with that. But if you diversify in like Vice Sports and Vice, I'm assuming there's a food channel here somewhere. If you diversify in that way, you can actually have a chance for the sports channel, for example, to blow up and the food channel to blow up separately and not damage your brand. But when you diversify this much, it's kind of like it just looks bad.
The only thing that Vice can really do to redeem itself is to go back to the kind of edgy content they were always known for. But if that's the case, what are they doing with Vice Sports and Munchies? These channels are all flopping apart from Vice News. The company is essentially trapped in a never-ending cycle of cleaning their content, disregarding their audience, losing money, and in turn being forced by investors to finally clean their content. While at the same time, investors keep squeezing as much money from their workers as possible. With the company now being forced by investors to employ the self-imposed 20/20 rule. Hire 22-year-olds, pay them $22,000, and work them 22 hours a day, resulting in even lower quality content as Vice's clickbait factory goes into the ground.
There's a lot of losers who will accept this and not even be mad about it, so I don't see the problem in abusing these idiots.
Because of this, it's not very
Let
surprising
them learn.
that Vice's original employees are now leaving the organization to start their own ventures instead. Vice's key journalist and beloved personality Hamilton Morris would soon no longer be available, as he would end up terminating his Pharmacopoeia series and employment at Vice a few years later in 2021. And even worse, the original co-founders behind Vice, the guys who made some of the best content Vice has ever done, have now all taken big steps back from making any documentaries. And when looking at the condition of the company today, it's clear to see that there is just no passion left in their audience, investors, or the
could show us like their growth numbers and shit like that. That would be pretty funny.
Employees themselves, which became all too clear when Disney went on record and actually publicly stated how poor a decision it was to invest in Vice, claiming investing $400 million in the company was one of the
Disney, come on. Everything you do is a poor decision. Stop.
worst mistakes they've ever made, with Vice's profitability taking a steady nosedive almost exactly when Disney started putting funds into the company, causing Disney to recently announce that they no longer believed there would ever be a return on investment for their shares in Vice.
True.
It's so bad that Disney's total initial investment into the company has now been drained so badly that they've lost $353 million in Vice. And to
that's 1/8 of their. That's less than 1/8 of their original investment remaining. That is insane. Well, not really insane. That's kind of to be expected.
pour salt in the wound, with $157 million of this being officially written off. And if it couldn't get any worse for Vice, their core audience, who were looking...
Well, if you can actually write off $153 million in business expenses or losses, I wonder how Disney actually fucking writes it off. Because all these big companies can write off things like this so extremely well.
Looking for edgy material have all but abandoned ship, as the YouTube stats and Google search trends show, leaving Vice left with only a bunch of nobodies, apathetically pumping out these endless insipid documentaries.
Joining a hippie commune to forgive myself. That just sounds sad. I would never click on that.
On uninteresting or lukewarm faux explicit topics. The Vice that was once known for being the cutting edge of journalism is now a shadow of its former self, and in all likelihood, it's only gonna get worse from here.
True. Good times. That's the end of the video. Funny. No pity for Vice. It's a shit show. Let's be real. Anyway, like and subscribe. Have a nice day. Bye bye.